So nobody dare come out when you are on night duty. You go out anyhow because we have some very mighty trees around the area. You know, it's a colonial, it's a hospital that is built by colonials.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
do we believe in
Thank you
that?
very much. Thank you. Yeah. And
But they believe it comes from the Iroko tree mostly.
yeah. Yeah. There are so many things that I'm going to read some things about it, and then I'll ask if you believe in it when I'm done reading it. And this is their own experience, Shoyinka's experience. So, a mother's brother, uncle Sonya, who lived there, was acknowledged to be an Oro, which made him at home in the woods, even at night. On one occasion, however, he must have gone too far. They had visited us before, she said, to complain. Mind you, they wouldn't actually come into the compound. They stood far off at the edge where the woods ended. Their leader, the one who spoke, and emitted wild sparks from a head that seemed to be an entire ball of embers. No, I'm mixing up two occasions. That was the second time when he chased us home. The first time they had merely sent an emissary. He was quite dark, short, and swarthy. He came right to the backyard and stood there while he ordered us to call the Reverend. It was as if Uncle had been expecting the visit. He came out of the house and expected him and asked him what he wanted. We all huddled in the kitchen, peeping out. What was his voice like? Did he speak like an egugu? I'm coming to it, this man. Well, I suppose one should call him a man. He wasn't quite human, we could see that. Much too large a head, and he kept his eyes on the ground. So he said he had come to report us. They didn't mind our coming to the woods, even at night, but we were to stay off any area beyond the rocks and that clump of bamboo by the stream. Well, what did Uncle say? And you haven't said what his voice was like. Tinu turned her elder sister's eye on me. Let Mama finish the story. You want to know everything. All right, he spoke just like your father. Are you satisfied? I did not believe that, but I let it pass. Go on. What did grand uncle do? He called everyone together and warned us to keep away from the place. And yet you went back? Well, you know your uncle Sonya. He was angry. For one thing, the best snails are on the other side of that stream. So he continued to complain that those Oro were just being selfish and he was going to show them who he was. Well, he did. About a week later, he led us back. And he was right, you know. We gathered a full basket and a half of the biggest snails you ever saw. Well, by this time, we had all forgotten about the warning. There was plenty of moonlight, and anyway, I've told you Sonya is an Oro himself. But why? He looks normal like you and us. You won't understand yet. Anyway, he is Oro. So with him, we felt quite safe until suddenly, this sort of light, like a ball of fire, began to glow in the distance. Even while it was still far, we kept hearing voices, as if a lot of people around us were grumbling the same words together. As if a lot of people around us were grumbling the same words together. They were saying something like, "You stubborn, stiff necked children. We've warned you, but you just won't listen." Wild Christian looked above our heads, frowning to recollect the better. One can't even say they. It was only this figure of fire that I saw, and it was still very distant. Yet I heard him distinctly, as if he had many mouths, which were pressed against my ears. Every moment, the fireball loomed larger and larger. What did Uncle Sawyer do? What did Uncle Sawyer do? Did he fight him? Sawyer wo niye. He was the first to break and run. Bo lo ya mi. Odi kitipa kitipa. No one remembered all those fat snails. That Inwi followed us all the way to the house. Our screams had arrived long before us, and the whole household was, well, you can imagine the turmoil. Uncle had already dashed down the stairs and was in the backyard. We ran past him while he went out to meet the creature. This time, that Inwi actually passed the line of the woods. He continued as if he meant to chase us right into the house. You know, he wasn't running, just pursuing us steadily. We waited. This was it. Wild Christian mused while we remained in suspense. Then she breathed deeply and shook her head with a strange sadness. the period of faith is gone. There was faith among our early Christians, real faith, not just church going and hymn singing. Faith, Igbagbo, and it is out of that faith that real power comes. Uncle stood there like a rock. He held out his Bible and ordered, go back to that forest which is your home. Back, I said, in the name of God. And that was it. The creature simply turned and fled, those sparks falling off faster and faster until there was just a faint glow receding into the woods. She sighed. Of course, after prayers that evening, there was a price to be paid. 6 of the best on everyone's back. Sonia got 12, and we all cut grass every day for the next week. That was Shoyinka talking about his mother's experience. So the question is, Mommy, you asked if they are real or if we believe they existed. Well, um, Madam Eniola Shoyinka was a Christian, but she just told what happened to them when they were kids. No,
You
no, it
see,
is a word. No, we're just talking
okay,
about it.
I know.
No, but you
If you the Kuti's house, they were living in the Kuti's house, isn't it?
yes, at the time. No, that's
You-
the
No, I
mother.
just want to tell you the location
Eniola.
of that house. That
Okay.
why I can't doubt them is that that area is like there is a stream and there are bamboo trees. It's just behind my school, Abeokuta Grammar School, the old site at Igbeyi. And if that place in those days will be real forest, I tell you, because we call that place Sherwood, and the building is just behind the wood behind our own school, and they have woods around that house. So I don't know. I can't dispute it. They can't be telling lies. And my children who went to Abeokuta Grammar School, which is another bushy area, they still talk of bush babies. They confirm they used to see
Mhm.
bush babies, which I don't know. And that's Egbere, the ones Yorubas called Egbere. So I
Ọ̀nà àwọn
don't know.
ọlọ́gbọ́n ọlẹ́ wọn ìwìn àdégbére
Iwi
àti ìwìn àtọ̀rọ̀ ẹbí kan náà gbogbo
wọ́n máa ń
wọn.
sọ̀rọ̀ òwe àti Egbere, and that prompted me
Yes.
to. They have a clinic in their school, and they have to go in the night if they are sick. They will escort themselves across the road to Federal Annex, that is a Loot Annex in Idiabadie. So I felt, how can children in the night, dead of the night, because one is having malaria or something like that, they have to escort across the road, though they have to be in group. So I decided, I am one doctor. The doctor, I saw the son in England when I went off recent. That doctor, I've forgotten the boy's name, but he came to my son's house. We combined to be buying some medication for them, like malaria drugs and all the rest, drips and everything, anti-malaria and so on, just to make sure the children have enough in their clinic.
Okay. So apparently some people have had that experience before. So
Yes, I
just
think
to
so.
say that, so the reason I wanted to read, the reason I actually read that, let me just, it's not really part of Shoyinka. Well, it's part of Shoyinka story if you think about it, because it was narrating what had happened, what had been told to him by his mother, and things like that actually shape a person's way of thinking. I just wanted to say that, you know, people say things like, if I've not seen it before, then it doesn't really exist. Forget about this spirituality. There's nothing like paranormal activity. I like to tell people that, listen, but just because you haven't seen certain things does not mean that they don't exist, and that the spiritual world is also very real. And that even though Shoyinka's father was an Anglican minister and his mother was a serious Christian, he stopped being a Christian at a point, but still, he still acknowledges the spiritual. And I felt that it's important for me to quickly point that out. So let's get back to the gist. So we've spoken about Shoyinka. The other things about him that maybe we're going to get into much later is spirituality and things like that. But I really want to concentrate on the Nobel Prize, and then we'll now really spend time
Yinka
on the things that happened
is
in
an
Biafra.
atheist. Is he? He's an
No,
atheist. Oh,
no, he's an Ogun devotee.
okay.
He's an Ogun devotee. He believes in the Orisha. He's a basically traditional Yoruba religion adherent. Yeah. So let me read something. So we all know that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. Ogboni is not a religion. Ogboni is just a group of elders who, in time past, used to serve as the check to the king's authority in in the political arrangement in Yoruba towns. But we're talking about his religion or his faith or spirituality is more of an Ogun. By the way, he's also a hunter, so I think that also helps. So let me read something to you. So what I was saying earlier about, so we've talked about the cult accusation, that he started cultism. We already debunked that because he did not, and we talked about how fraternities and sororities, how they work in the U.S., and the idea that there were social clubs, and so what Soyinka started in University College Ibadan at the time was not a cult. It was a social club, and they had their own motto, their own objectives, their goals, and they even kept in touch even after school. And of course, it also led to something called the Sea Dog. I don't know if I should talk about that, but there's an association called Sea Dogs. It's even registered in Nigeria. Just to tell you the kind of organization they have, and not to always just chalk it down to ignorant statements oh, he founded cultism. And it's also a bit sad that the people who say these things are also university graduates. So that's why I always say the Nigerian educational system, we need to do better. It doesn't look like people really know what they talk about outside the course of study. Even sometimes the course they study itself, but it's important for us to remember that he didn't do that. But let me read something to you about the Sea Dogs, and then we'll go into how he won the Nobel Prize. So this is something about the National Association of Sea Dogs, popularly known as the Pyrates Confraternity. It was founded by Professor Wole Soyinka, and 6 students in 1952 to support human rights and social justice in Nigeria. And they changed them. You know what I was saying earlier, how the Pirates originally, their motto was against all conventions, which means against all rules. When they became older and they now started Sea Dogs, they changed that motto, and you also notice that you can tell that they started experiencing life. So the new motto is against all moribund conventions. And yes, they have colors white, red, and black, and the symbol is skull and crossbones. And today they have over 25,000 members, and they have their headquarters in Kubwa, Abuja. They call them Sea Dogs and Sailors. So I just felt it's important to mention that. And let me also mention the names of the people that started the organization. Of course, we know Wole Soyinka. Then there was Ralph Okpara. There was Nathaniel Oyelola. There was Pius Olege, Silvanus Egbuche, Olumiwa Awe, and Ipare Ig Imokwede. So that name, at least you should know Ig Imokwede. If you know anything about banking in Nigeria, two people were at the top of the affairs in Access Bank. One was Ike Mokwede, and then the other was the gentleman who passed on, Wigwe. So this Ike, who is in charge of Access Bank, I think is a son to Ipare Ike Mokwede, who was one of the founding members of National Association of Sea Dogs. Let me read something. Okay, so I think that's about it. So I just think it's important for us to highlight that. There have been other things that have happened, but at the core of what they were doing, they were never an occultic group. Now, in 1986, Soyinka won his prize. And 4 years ago, somebody interviewed him and he said something based on what another person said about his winning or about him winning. We're going to talk about that now. So, right now in the conversation, we're talking about the Nobel Prize. Like I said, the longer conversation will be on Biafra and his involvement in the Biafran struggle. So let me read this thing. It's from Punch newspaper. Was published on 26 July 2020. Excuse me. I'm just going to read here. Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka has said he was disappointed by a comment made by the late renowned novelist Professor Chinua Achebe shortly after Soyinka won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. In a conversation with an American-based Nigerian novelist, Oke Ndibe, which was aired on Channels Television's Book Club, Soyinka said he considered the particular remark by Achebe uncalled for and disappointing. Ndibe, during the conversation with Soyinka, recalled how Achebe at one time said the Nobel Prize did not make one the Ashiwaju of African literature. He then asked Soyinka how he took that statement, and Soyinka said the subject was not even literature, which he, Achebe, made the statement. And so I was disappointed that he created a nexus between my normal socio-political life and my normal way of articulating an opinion. So it's almost like because I won the Nobel Prize, I have no right to offer to do what I used to do before all my life. I responded to it, even though I wanted to make light of it. I was a little bit disappointed and I did not see the necessity that particular subject, which was under contention, didn't relate to literature. So, you know how somebody said on Twitter that when he won, Achebe did not go there, everybody boycotted it. It's a lie. What really happened was that some people did not like the fact that he won. And Achebe had said something to the effect that just because he won the prize does not make him the Ashiwaju of African literature. So I want you to understand when we get into it, because I'm going to read a book by Achebe right about now. That also, Achebe, by the way, was also in UI, University College Ibadan. And there's that, Tiwara, that's actually the truth. It's that jealousy, right? Saying that you winning doesn't make you the Ashiwaju, like he never claimed to be Ashiwaju. But I read this first before I go into the war, which is where I'm going right now. And I'm going to be starting with a particular book that he wrote. So Achebe wrote the last book I think that he published, and I I wish, how do I say it? I wished when he was about to pass on, he left a better legacy in terms of the final book that he wrote. That book, some of it is actually quite good. Many of the things I see in the book, it's just like somebody would never let certain things go. And just to be clear, the person who wrote this in 1986 about someone who won the Nobel Prize, saying that doesn't make him the Ashiwaju of African literature, you now also see during the war they stole UI properties to Southeast. It's possible, but maybe if he comes around, he can show us the paper. But then the point is that welcome, Madam Asha. But the point is that when he said that, it wasn't even about literature. And Shoyinka talking about it in 2020, about how many years would that be? About 34 years after the fact, still felt it was unnecessary for him to bring that. So please remember what I just said right now. That let me look for the book I want to read. The book is called "There Was a Country." And before I read that book, let me quickly say something. That "There Was a Country" was written by a man who, regardless of what you think about him, you have to know this about that book before you read it. I had to understand the person who wrote the book before I read the book. And when I read it, I was disappointed myself, but I understood at least why he would write that kind of thing. It was the person in charge of Radio Biafra during the war. When you hear Radio Biafra, what you think about is IPOP, and you think of Nnamdi Kanu. Nnamdi Kanu is just the recent, occupant of that space called director of that position. Chinua Achebe he wasn't the first, I think it was the second person to occupy that space, but he was actually the chief propagandist during the war. And so and I'm saying this not to cast aspersions on him, but just to tell you that when you are reading that book, if you choose to read it, understand the person who wrote it so that you are able to put it in proper perspective. So let me read something that he wrote about Shoyinka. But where is it though? Where is Tiwala? Do you want to come up? You're probably working though, or busy. But let me read something that. Let me quickly open to it. All right, page 112. Page 112. Oh, okay. So I get it. I get that. That's fine. Welcome, Madam Asha. Welcome, Madam Asha. Ekabo. Oh yes, Ayodeji. Oh,
Ẹ ṣeun
sorry,
sà,
Madam
ẹ
Asha.
kú iṣẹ́, ẹ kú ètò.
Ekabo, ma.
Ẹ sà.
Ekwatumaro. Yes, ma. Yes. So, Madam Asha is very correct with what you just wrote in the comment section. He was the biggest. The biggest of them. He was a propagandist by excellence, and it's true. Read that book. It's still propaganda, right? And it's important to read it though, so at least you understand how he saw it. But you can't just take everything hook, line, and sinker. So you want to read other people to in order to make up your mind. But let me read one of the things that he said. The story I was told about this incident was that Wole, fed up with the federal government's unsuccessful treatment of the Biafra issue, had traveled to secessionist Biafra in an attempt to appeal for a ceasefire to the hostilities. He planned to set up an anti-war delegation made up of intellectuals, artists, and writers from both sides of the conflict and from around the world to achieve his aim. When he returned to Nigeria, the authorities arrested him and accused him of assisting Biafra in the purchase of weapons of war. There was no evidence to corroborate their case, and Wole was imprisoned without bail. Later, to justify holding him without evidence, the federal government accused Wole of being a Biafra agent or spy, trumped up charges that he categorically denied. I remembered relating my distrust about Soyinka's predicament to the editors of Transition in 1968 during the war. I have no intention of being placed in the Nigerian situation at all. I find it intolerable. I find the Nigerian situation untenable. If I had been a Nigerian, I think I would have been in the same situation as Wole Soyinka is in prison. There was great concern for Wole's health and safety as time went on. For many of the months he was in prison, he was held in solitary confinement and moved from one prison to another. Most of us in Biafra were appalled. Penn International and many major writers of the time, Norman Mailer comes to mind. He led a vigorous protest on his behalf, but he was not released until close to the very end of the war. And I think that the reason I said earlier that there was a Jalara and the way he talked about the Nobel Prize, but then when it came to the fact that because Wole Soyinka supported the Biafran struggle, he said something different about him, especially from this perspective. However, this is where I'm going. There are people today who talk disparagingly about Wole Soyinka, but I don't know if they read the book of one of their heroes, who was Chinua Achebe, and what is said that Wole Soyinka had to go through. He was in prison for more than 20 months because of Biafra. We're going to read a few things. I'm going to read. I'd have loved to read his own account in The Man Died and You Must Set Forth at Dawn, but maybe I'll do that later. First, I'd like to read something from what's this man's name? Professor Kolio Motosho. So now we have gotten to the Biafran phase of this conversation, and I know that we might spend more time discussing it because I tend to have a lot more sources on that, ranging from Kolio Motosho to Obasanjo himself, and maybe later we are going to read the book by Wole Soyinka. So you know who Wole Soyinka is. So maybe you know, or you probably don't know this, but let me read from Omotosho. This book is called Just Before Dawn, and you're going to hear what Ojukwu said about Wole Soyinka and why you should not be following all these things that people are saying out there, saying, you know, is this, is that, just because it not support a particular candidate, which is just ridiculous. All right, so here it is. Yet he knew that Victor, this is Kolio Motosho writing, and he's going to be reporting Ojukwu. He knew that Victor Banjo could not simply go back to the other side without incurring danger to himself. Thus, it was in his interest to stay on the side of Biafra. We must not forget the feelings of the minorities, Banjo continued. They are of importance in the way this, by the way, you know who Victor Banjo is? Um, uh, please, do we know who Victor Banjo was, at least, before I continue reading? So I'm not just throwing out names. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So um, let me continue. Thank you for knowing that. It helps. We must not forget the feelings of the minorities, Banjo continued. They are of importance in the way this whole thing will turn out. Victor Banjo is the first Yoruba, but no, it's probably the second. There's another one. There's a clown that wanted to stab Saburi Biobaku at University of Lagos because he felt that his appointment was tribalist, was inspired by tribalism. We've had a number of Yoruba bots. They usually are very senseless. But I still respect Victor Banjo Shao, but that particular one that stabbed Saburi Biobaku, that one has no sense. But Victor Banjo, his own case is even complex. But let me just keep reading. We must not forget the feelings of the minorities, Banjo continued. They are of importance in the way this whole thing will turn out. Don't talk to me about minorities, Ojuku said. Let me calm down. I'll take a drink of water. Please let's keep liking and sharing. So when you hear that, when they went to go to Ore, when they went to go to the Midwest, that Banjo, Victor Banjo balked. We're going to read some of the things that happened. I also know that Christian brothers and sisters can be like Bro Bruce Lee. It is well with our Christianity in Nigeria. They just carry one American version, give Nigerians. Nigeria will not understand what they're even carrying. One day we'll talk about the intersection of or the evolution of Yoruba Christianity. It's funny, and that's why even the Nigerian, even in the last election, they supported the particular candidate because he was Christian. It's stupid. I'm telling you, because just because you're a Christian does not mean you know what you're talking about. That's the truth. And personally, in all that, well, yeah, it is what it is. Let me just read. We must not forget the feelings of the minorities, Banjo continued. They are of importance in the way this whole thing will turn out. Don't talk to Niger, babe. Oh, it is all with all our Abrahamics. Oh, that's true. You're welcome. Today's topic is a very sensitive topic. We're talking about Wole Soyinka, Daddy. Don't worry. People get it. And that's why, if you notice, if it was just going to be like saga, oh, thank you so much. Thank you for that, Mommy Eshegon. If it was just going to be about saga, we would not have gone through, his early life, the issue of confraternity, then the Nobel Prize, and I didn't stay there for long. There's a reason I did that. And watch a lunchtime maybe. She were Cabo. Thanks for coming around before going back in. So let me read this. So this was this was Victor Banjo, talking about his own feelings about the minorities of Midwest. Let's keep tapping, let's keep sharing. We must not forget the feelings of the minorities, Banjo continued. They are of importance in the way this whole thing will turn out. Don't talk to me about minorities, Ojuku said, waving aside the issue. Victor Banjo could not believe that someone with Ojuku's intelligence could not recognize that the case of the Igbo must be a base to launch forward for the rest of the country. Was this a repeat of Zik of Africa, Zik of Nigeria, Zik of Eastern Region, Zik of Onitsha, and just finally, ordinary Zik? What a waste of talent. By the way, what I just read now, if you sit down to think about it, it's very, very deep. So I'm going to repeat that last line. Was this a repeat of Zik of Africa, Zik of Nigeria, Zik of Eastern Region, Zik of Onitsha, and just finally ordinary Zik? What a waste of talent. By the way, I'm reading page 287 of Just Before Dawn by Kole Omotosho. The nights dragged by and they seemed to be getting nowhere. From time to time, someone would drift in and then out. Ojuku would excuse himself and go to speak to someone at the entrance to the sitting room and then come back. Both of them had looked forward to this encounter, but they seemed to be stuck, each in his own position. I do not make light of the suffering of the Igbo. I think it's a shame that we all must bear. By the way, when you hear Igbo, it's because that's how it was spelled back in the day. So nobody should get angry and be shouting, you're not spelling it right. Just chill. I do not make light of the suffering of the Igbo. I think it is a shame that we all must bear for a long time in our history. But that should be the beginning of our struggle rather than the end. That is my position. Let us see what is possible at every point. Use it and then go on. That is the only way to do things. For instance, your attitude to the old politicians is simply not good enough. We need them and they can be used and then disposed of. Then you do not know them, Ojuku interjected. Once you bring them in, you cannot get rid of them that easily. I don't want any of them around me. There was a long silence. Then Victor Banjo suddenly asked, "What are my instructions for the Midwest?" "Your target is Lagos, via Benin and Ibadan," Ojukwu said warmly, as if he was now in an area of certainty. The Midwest thing was his brainchild, and the simplicity of it astounded him. Once the idea occurred to him, the execution of it seemed so simple he could not understand how nobody else had thought of it. "It is absolutely compulsory that you move fast. Surprise is the only weapon we have. Go to Lagos. Everything is arranged. You leave tomorrow night. How do you contact your people in Ibadan?" And this is the answer he gave. Please listen very well. So we've been talking about the conversation between Victor Banjo and Colonel Odumego Ojukwu. So he says, "Go to Lagos. Everything is arranged. You leave tomorrow night. How do you contact your people in Lagos?" "Through Wole Soyinka, the playwright. You know him?" "Yes, I do." "Yes. He is to make the contact. There should be no problem." That statement did not represent what Victor Banjo felt in his guts. It was not going to be easy. He was going to Yoruba land as what? Conqueror in the name of the Igbo, in the name of Ojukwu. What role could he apportion to them in Biafra? How could he, this is 288, how could he, in the short period available to him, convince his people that his aims and those of Ojukwu were miles apart and would continue to be so for quite some time? That what put them together was the need to break the status quo and redistribute power in the nation. "Victor," Ojukwu said, "you are dozing. Why don't you go and rest for now and get ready for this major work?" "I wasn't dozing really, just thinking." "All the same, go and sleep and rest yourself. Everything is in order for your move tomorrow." On August 9, 1967, Victor Banjo led Biafran forces into the Midwest and threatened the western states and Lagos. Panic spread throughout the country. As soon as they got to Benin, Banjo contacted Wole Soyinka through a telephone number in the University of Ibadan. Omenola Rosino. Yes, Oromio Black. Yes, Etigbaton. By the way, Oromio Black carves some beautiful, beautiful how do I call it now? Woodwork, right? So if you're interested in that kind of thing, please check out his page. He sent me one. It's beautiful. So if you like, artwork and stuff like that, made out of wood, sculpted. He sent me one that was made out of walnut tree, I think. Very beautiful stuff. So I had to say that because I saw him. I thought it was cool. So let me go back. On August 9, 1967, Victor Banjo, you're welcome, sir. Victor Banjo led Biafran forces into the Midwest and threatened the western states and Lagos. Panic spread throughout the country. As soon as they got to Benin, Banjo contacted Wole Soyinka through a telephone number in the University of Ibadan. He gave him the names of some military personnel he should see and asked him to confirm their support for his move into the West. Of these people, the most important was Olusegun Obasanjo, commander of the Nigerian forces in the West. Wole Soyinka contacted Obasanjo and they talked on the move, driving through the silent night of Ibadan. As soon as Obasanjo dropped Wole Soyinka off at the petrol station where he had picked him up earlier that night, he contacted Gowon to report that it had been proposed that he let Victor Banjo into the western region. Wole Soyinka was later picked up and incarcerated for the duration of the Civil War. I rushed through some things. I'm just going to read it slowly so that we really understand what I just read. So Victor Banjo contacted Wole Soyinka while he was in Benin. Of course, Wole Soyinka was in the University of Ibadan. Wole Soyinka then contacted Obasanjo, and then they had a conversation about what Victor Banjo was up to. And then Obasanjo contacted Gowon. But much later, they picked up, of course, you're dealing with the military government. They picked up Wole Soyinka, Ekabo M. Bravo. They picked up Wole Soyinka and he was in prison throughout the duration of the war. He was there for more than 20 months. And he was there for the people who now insult him on Twitter, in newspapers, on radio, and in one interesting television somewhere in Lagos. I'm just trying to tell you what happened to him and the things he went through just because of Biafra. Let me continue reading. In Benin, Banjo wait. By the way, I'm reading Just Before Dawn by Kole Omotosho. And this is page 288. In Benin, Banjo waited for the outcome of his contacts in the West, spending Nigeria, yes, 22 months. 22 months. That's almost 2 years in prison. In Benin, Banjo waited for the outcome of his contacts in the West, spending the time meeting various people of the Midwest region and making speeches, which at first surprised, then enraged Ojukwu, shouting that the man in Benin will soon be giving everybody cocktail parties, instead of getting on to Ibadan and Lagos according to his instructions. In Lagos, Murtala Mohammed once more found himself rallying to help clear the mess that Gowon seemed to be getting the country into with his soft approach to the problem of Ojukwu. In Ibadan, some people were already preparing the songs of welcome for the Army of Liberation, while others screamed over the radio, insisting that the West must not be used as battleground for the contest between the East and the North. By this time, Wole Soyinka had stopped contacting Banjo from the telephone in his house on the university campus. He had found a telephone that worked in one of the unused government houses somewhere in Agodi. What he wanted to know was when would Banjo arrive in the West. What Banjo wanted to know was the nature of his welcome if he went into the West. The two questions were unheard by the parties to this dialogue, as the lines were not clear, and so no answers could be given to either question. Soyinka waited in Ibadan, and Banjo waited in Benin, and Ojukwu was losing his temper in Enugu. Soyinka then placed Chimisholanke, an actor, musician colleague, by the side of his telephone with a specific message for Solanke to relay to Banjo. Unless you give specific instructions by tomorrow night, the doctor will not perform the operation and your old man will die. You are the only person who can do anything about it. The doctor has submitted his report and there has to be an operation. You must give instructions for the operation or else it will not be done. Yes, Jimmy Sholanke of Storyland. What did Atuche Chris say? He was not arrested because of Biafra. He was arrested because he's helping Banjo. Why was he helping Banjo? See, the reason this thing will never end is because you guys will never stop lying to yourselves. He was not arrested because of Biafra. He was arrested because of Banjo. Why was it? Because he was helping Banjo. Why was he helping Banjo? He was helping Banjo because of the instruction that Ojukwu gave for Biafra, because he was on his way to Lagos and he had to go through Ibadan. Like, does telling the truth hurt you? Does acknowledging the fact that this man actually suffered because of Biafra, does it reduce your worth? This phone call that you just heard now, does it sound as though he's telling Victor Banjo what should happen to Victor Banjo's wife and children? He's talking about an operation that was going to be carried out because of Biafra by Biafran soldiers. And nobody's even blaming you guys. This is the problem. You just hate the truth. Who sent Banjo to Wole Soyinka? What does Biafra need the West for? Go and ask Ojukwu. And get his phone number from his wife. In fact, this is going to be a very interesting topic. The books are plenty, by the way. And I told you, it's the Biafra part that we're going to really discuss. All those other ones are just introduction. So I'm going to keep reading. There are other books, but this one is the one by Colin Motoshaw. And we have read the one by, you know what? Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Please just give me a second. Let's read that book. That one by Chinua Achebe. And that is why I started with Chinua Achebe's book, because he's Igbo. And although I do not agree with everything in his book, I saw some things that made a lot of sense, and I saw some things I would never agree with. And that's how scholarship works. You don't have to agree with everything anybody says, but you can acknowledge some of the things they are saying. This is what he said. This is what this is what Chinua Achebe said. No, I'm going to go back to it. This is what Chinua Achebe said about Wole Soyinka and his connection to Biafra, contrary to what Atuche Chris is saying in the comment section. So this is Achebe, who was the director of Radio Biafra, who was there during the war before myself and Atuche and everybody apart from Mommy Titilayo that I can tell before we were born. So let me just read. Banjo had ambition and Ojukwu gave him the needed support. You are You are high, sir. You are very high. This is what Chinua Achebe said in his book, There Was a Country. This is page 112. That's page 112. The story I was told about this incident was that Wole, fed up with the federal government's unsuccessful treatment of the Biafra issue, had traveled to secessionist Biafra, even traveled to Biafra eventually, but we're going to get there later. But let me just start with this one. I want to start with Achebe's stuff. Achebe was Minister of Communication. Yes, he was in charge of communications for Biafra. The story I was told about this incident was that Wole, fed up with the federal government's unsuccessful treatment of the Biafra issue, had traveled to secessionist Biafra in an attempt to appeal for a ceasefire to the hostilities. He planned to set up an anti-war delegation made up of intellectuals, artists, and writers from both sides of the conflict and from around the world to achieve his aim. When he returned to Nigeria, the authorities arrested him and accused him of assisting Biafra, not of assisting Victor Banjo like Atuche Chris was saying, of assisting Biafra in the purchase of weapons of war. There was no evidence to corroborate their case, and Wole was imprisoned without bail. Later, to justify holding him without evidence, the federal government accused Wole of being a Biafran agent or spy, not a Victor Banjo agent nor spy. Trumped up charges that he categorically denied. I remember relating my disgust about Soyinka's predicament to the editors of Transition in 1968 during the war. I have no intention of being pleased in the Nigerian situation at all. This is Achebe talking now. I find it intolerable. I find the Nigerian situation untenable. If I had been a Nigerian, I think I would have been in the same situation as Wole Soyinka is, in prison. You are an Igbo person. Stop throwing Midwest around. You are an Igbo person. Just embrace it. Nobody has a problem with your ethnic group. You guys will mention I'm Delta when you want to say Shebu, you say Jamba. You now remember that you now remember they are Igbo when somebody catches you. If I'd been a Nigerian, I think I would have been in the same situation as Wole Soyinka is in prison. That is Chinua Achebe. Then he says there was great concern for Wole's health and safety as time went on. For many of the months he was in prison, he was held in solitary confinement. No, please don't mute him yet. Okay, 1 minute is fine. 1 minute is fine. But it's good. Let him continue. It helps the conversation to be serious, to be quite clear. I would just bring up new books. There was great concern for Wole's health and safety as time went on. For many of the month he was in prison, he was held in solitary confinement and moved from one prison to another. Most of us in Biafra were appalled. Penn International and many major writers of the time, Norman Mailer comes to mind, led a vigorous protest on his behalf, but he was not released until close to the very end of the war. That is Achebe talking about what happened, and not once did he even mention Victor Banjo. And Atuche will come here to tell us that the reason they arrested, how do you hate a person this much? Hate him to the point where you even find a way to say he didn't do what he did for you and your people. Like, make it make sense. So let's go back to what he was saying. You know how, for instance, when he left Jimmy Sholanke, who you all know on TV, especially if you grew up in the western side, don't ever side with others against your own. Exactly. Because if something happens, they will tell you that you didn't do it for them. You did it because you had ambition. And that's why I feel sorry for this Yoruba bots, because they keep gaslighting you. They keep gaslighting you because you also don't know what happened. But again, another day we'll really talk about the Biafra war. But for today, we're just talking about Wole Soyinka's role in it. And we've not even gone far before somebody said, he was arrested because he was the twin brother of Victor Banjo. Ridiculous. Let's continue. So this was what he said to Sholanke. This was what Wole Soyinka told Jimmy Sholanke about Banjo, or the message that he should relate to Banjo. Unless you give specific instructions by tomorrow night, the doctor cannot. The doctor will not perform the operation and your old man will die. You are the only person who can do anything about it. The doctor has submitted his report and there has to be an operation. You must give instructions for the operation or else it will not be done. Jimmy Sholanke sat by the telephone for almost 24 hours, but it never rang. In the meantime, Ojukwu called Victor Banjo back to Enugu to inquire what kept him in Benin. The Midwest and the Biafran army disintegrated with the active support of the local population. Suddenly, signs such as Uroboman lives here, Benin man's shop, and one Nigeria appeared in front of buildings like the protective smear of Passover blood, which demarcated the doors of the Jews and protected them from the angel of death. Those who suffered most were the poorer Igbo men and women and their children who could not find transport back into Biafra, since the Biafran soldiers had commandeered all transport vehicles to get themselves and their booty back to... Should I even talk about this? Let's talk about this. I'll be calm, Sha. At least I'll try. So what happened here was that the Biafran forces had declared Benin a republic. And of course, we know what happened with the central bank. They actually did loot central bank. The Central Bank of Nigeria that was in the Midwest at the time, which was in Benin. And what the army did was to, instead of even allowing the Igbo people to go back into Biafra, they commanded all the vehicles to take, when you hear booty, they're talking about money, they're talking about things that they got from Benin back to Biafra. I'm trying not to go deep into it because I want to keep it about Wole Soyinka. So maybe let me just get myself, let's just go back to the book. By September 20, 1967, the federal forces had driven the Biafran forces out of the Midwest. This was the first major setback that the Biafrans were to suffer in the process of the Civil War. Years afterwards, it was said that federal soldiers kept civil service office hours, fighting between 7:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. on weekdays and a half day on Saturdays, that the armies on both sides fraternized across the lines, going to play football with one another, until Ojukwu ordered some federal soldiers who had come to play with his soldiers to be executed. I'm going to read that part again. Years afterwards, it was said that the federal soldiers, that's the Nigerian soldiers, kept civil service office hours. They fought between 7:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. on weekdays and half days on Saturdays. And that the armies on both sides, that's both the Nigerian army and the Biafran army, were playing football. Just like what you saw happen in Germany during the Second World War, where people would even exchange bottles of drink, right? Especially during winter, Christmas. So the armies on both sides fraternized across the lines, going to play football with one another until Ojukwu ordered some federal soldiers who had come to play with his soldiers to be executed. That Yakubu Gowon's chief of staff, Supreme Headquarters, was busy doing a part-time law degree at the University of Lagos. This emphasized the lack of seriousness with which the Civil War was being fought and directed. This single serious issue in the Civil War was that ordinary people were dying, and Sebastian Okoro was determined not to be one of them. He would speak to no one, not even his wife, about his feelings on what was going on. There was so much hysteria that one did not know who to trust. He joined in the demonstrations in support of Biafra and made the expected noises of solidarity with the new state, but inside himself, he remained neutral. He could not choose between the noise of the state and the noise of the state seekers, the minorities of the Rivers area. But he listened to them, but he listened to them all on his transistor radio, which never left his side. The idea of boogeyman and saboteurs ravaged Biafra, and the execution of Victor Banjo, along with three others, did not completely satisfy the people who wanted to find scapegoats for the defeat of their army in the Midwest and the capture of Enugu soon after. Madam Asha, would you like to say anything before I go back to another book?
All right, sir. Uh,
Good afternoon, ma.
I knew that discussing the life of Wole Soyinka and his work and his support for Biafra would make us discuss the Nigeria Civil War. And it will open a lot of things because today a lot of propaganda, aside Wole Soyinka, a lot of propaganda has been leveled against the Yoruba nation. And anybody who has read different accounts of the Civil War would know that the Yoruba people, they were in their best. They did not support both the federal government nor do they support, did they support Biafran government during the Nigerian Civil War. Why the Igbo people now attack the Yoruba nation more than they attack the North for the Nigerian Civil War is what I don't understand. That's number one. Number two, why the Igbos want to absolve themselves and their leaders of the cause and the cause of the Nigerian Civil War, all the things that played out that led to the Nigerian Civil War, and the atrocities that were committed during the Nigerian Civil War. They only want to talk about what Nigerian government, the federal government did to them, but they do not want to talk about what they did. Is what baffles me. And it is one of the reasons that the Igbos and their generations unborn can never heal. Because there's one thing that truth does. Truth heals. Yes, when you know the truth, when you allow truth to play its part in your life, you heal. Now, of course, they have started making another mistake because they have never healed from that Nigerian Civil War. They never faced the facts, the truth of the Nigerian Civil War and the atrocities that were committed by their own leaders during that war. What was passed to them? I have read accounts, different accounts of the Nigerian Civil War, both from their own side and both from the side of other Nigerians. And I have come to realize that both the federal government and the Igbo nation are to be blamed, especially their leaders are to be blamed for the Nigerian Civil War. But not wanting to accept the fact that your leaders are to be blamed, you turn them to heroes. Why you blame other people's leaders is what will not allow the Igbo people to heal. And an example is what they are doing to Wole Soyinka and Victor Banjo. Now, a friend of mine who is a pastor in Ibadan has written a book on Victor Banjo from the point of view of his own family. He interviewed the family and he was able to put together a book on Victor Banjo. And we discovered in that book that Victor Banjo, number one, I don't know if I can call him a Yoruba but I'm not sure I can do that. The reason is because when you look at the context of what happened and why Victor Banjo supported. Excuse me now. Come sit down. Come on, sit down here. Come on, sit down. Now, wow. When you look at the context of what happened, you will realize that it is, if you were in that situation, let's just put ourselves in the shoes of Victor Banjo, would we have been able to say no to Ojukwu's, to supporting Ojukwu for the Nigerian Civil War? Would we have been able to say no? I'm not sure we would have been able to say no. So it is one of the reasons why I find it very difficult to call Victor Banjo a Yoruba but. Because one of the reason he was pied, that Ojukwu pied him, was because he refused to take over Lagos, to proceed to Lagos, to take over Lagos, because he said that he felt that why would he be used to fight his own people and to hand over his own people to Biafra, to Ojukwu. So it's one of the reasons I find it very difficult, where from his own account, his family's account. That is one of the reasons I find it difficult to call him Yoruba but. And Wole Soyinka's case is like what many of us did last week, that went ahead in our identity, attacking our own identity and our own people. Because there's no how I support you because of humanity. If you attack my own people, I will withdraw my support. You can't be attacking Yoruba people and you think I will support you. Once you start attacking my people, I will the old western region when we were still in our regions, how Nnamdi Azikiwe sold southern Nigeria to the north, betrayed southern Nigeria to the north, how he planned so much to take over the west. He didn't understand all that politics that even led Baba Awolowo to prison. That was why he supported the Biafra war and was able to, he had to go to prison for them. And today, we can see now, everything has played out, and I'm very sure that Baba is more knowledgeable today of the people he supported then. That number one, they are very ungrateful people. They are people who can never blame themselves for their own faults. Yes, the Igbo nation have consistently continued to absolve their leaders, especially Ojukwu, of the cause of the Nigerian civil war. They have consistently absolved their leaders of the politics that created the Nigeria we have today, that was played before the Nigerian civil war. They have consistently absolved their leaders. And it is one of the reasons why they can never heal. It is one of the reasons why, as it is today, they are already making another mistake, that if they are not careful, they will come back again to sing another song of regret and another song of blaming others. Shut up. Because anybody who knows what is going on presently in the southeast will know what I'm talking about. That very, very soon. Okay, for instance, let's pick up some events. Today, they will come out and gaslight Nigerians and say that they confiscated their money. Say, well, they confiscated their money during the war. But they will never tell you that they looted the central bank when they took over the Midwest. They will never tell you, they will never accept that they did that.
Madam Asha, just to be clear, no money was just to be clear, no money was confiscated during the war. What really happened?
I know.
Was that people
I'm going to come to that.
Okay.
I'm going to come to that fact that no money was confiscated. You know, they accused Nigerians of the federal government of confiscating their money. But eventually it was said that no money was actually confiscated. Why they looted the central bank. Now, no money was confiscated because all of them took their money and changed it to the Biafran notes. Before the war, that was what they did. It's in the history books. But today, they will never want to read history. They will never recourse to history, to the facts of history. They will always come out with their propaganda and say this is what Nigeria did to them. That's what I was going to that. That is always the issue. So there are more lies on the social media today, especially on the social media. We propagate more lies about this past event than that. And that is why I keep saying it. These people will never heal because their children do not know the facts of the Nigerian civil war. And the Nigerian educational system is not even helping the matter.
I think
People can no longer learn the facts of history. They only consume what is given to them on the social media, which most often they are 95% lies. So that is a nation already going into another mistake that may spell their extinction if they are not careful. Because this time around, it is going to be self-destruction. I'm going to come up later.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly say this before I read. I'm going to read a Colonel Luyomade's report on what happened at Ore because of what Atuche said. But let me say something, Atuche. If they like, let them print that currency 1 month to the end of the war. The point is that no money belonging to any Biafran was confiscated. I have video records, or recordings rather, of people whose parents got their money back, or people whose parents got their houses back. No house was taken in the southwest. The only place where house was taken was in Port Harcourt, and there's a reason for that. And I will leave the Port Harcourt people to come and tell you why. But don't come here and make it again. This is the problem I have with most people. When people say things like this, you now start feeling sorry because you don't know any better. How do you withdraw money and change it to money that has not changed? Please sit down, think about your question, and tell me if it makes sense to you. So you take your money from a particular place. By the way, at the time, how many people were really banked in Nigeria? You take your money, you leave, you move to the southeast, you live your life somehow with whatever it is that you had. I mean, they were spending there, and that's the reason Ojukwu and his boys, broke into the central bank in Benin. And so the idea that you took money from there, if you like, convert it, the point is that you're able to use it for what you wanted to use it for. And eventually, when you ask the people to exchange that money for pound for Biafra, by the way, let me say this, and I think it's important, and I'm saying this respectfully and with all the love I can muster. The 20 pound that was given to you was not your right. As a matter of fact, Awo did it against the council of the committee. And guess who paid that money? It was Western Region. They didn't, it wasn't a right. There was no, tell me any civil war, American Civil War, how much was given to the Confederacy to the Confederates after the war? You can't keep gaslighting people and blackmailing them with something that thankfully we now know, and there's no way you're going to make it seem as though you were also the aggressor. When you wrote, we don't have any problem with Western region, we're going to Lagos. What were you going to do in Lagos? Was your goal not to have a separate region? Why did you have to go to Lagos? By the way, Lagos was bombed twice. The Casino Hotel was bombed, and you know exactly who did it. And Lucy, you have not read a book in your life. You have no right to be telling me what to say or what not to say, because you don't even know what the newspaper looks like. The point is that if you have any problem with history, go back in time and change it. But don't come here and start saying things like, "Oh, Soyinka did what he did because he had his reasons. We don't need their help." Oh, hey, welcome. You don't need Soyinka's help. You don't need Victor Banjo's help. Then why are you like this? Let me quickly read something before I go back to what Obasanjo said about Soyinka's involvement in the war. Casino Cinema, sorry, Mr. Tayo, Casino Cinema, not Casino Hotel. I keep mixing the two together. Let me read something that happened at Oreb from Colonel Oyinlade Iliyomade. This is really not. This is not necessarily part of Wole Soyinka's story, but because of what I heard about the old, we're not going to Oreb to do anything. Let me just read something. And so it's an interview. Your role during the Civil War, particularly how you curtailed the onslaught of the Biafran soldiers at Ore, has been spoken about by fellow military men like General Alabi Isama. What exactly happened at the war front? So this is his response. When the Civil War commenced around June to July 1967, I was based in Ibadan, where I commanded a small unit. But I joined the military in 1952 with Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida and Sonny Abacha, who were my colleagues. I was sent to India for military training to be commissioned as infantry, that is to fight wars. The war started from the north, but it got to a breaking point when the Biafran soldiers wanted to break through and conquer the west. They believed that if they conquered the west, look at the word conquered, not that passed through. They believed that if they conquered the west, it would be easy for them to maneuver their way through the north. So they wanted to break through Ore into the west, then straight to Lagos. But at the beginning of August, I was dispatched to Ore village to act as security officer, to ensure internal security and to make the civilians aware of the presence of federal troops. I was there with 33 soldiers. Later, Biafra captured Midwest and arrived in Benin. This meant that their next target was the West. So I was told by then Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo, who was the commander. Sorry. Is it better now? Is it better now? Oxygen. All right, thank you. Atuche, what happened to your schooling now? Did you not finish? This is not something that Alabi Sama said. This is something that Iliyomade said. The only mention of Alabi Sama is the fact that Alabi Sama acknowledged his prowess as a soldier. I thought you went to school. Let me go back to this. Later, Biafra captured Midwest and arrived in Benin. This meant that their next target was the West. So I was told by then Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo, who was the commander in Ibadan, to move to Ore border which is about 19 miles to our village. Then I moved there that night, but I told Obasanjo that I was ill-equipped to curtail the Biafran attack. What can 33 soldiers do? So he promised to reinforce, and he did keep to his promise. Then our total strength grew to 179 soldiers to defend the place. I had premonition of danger, and when I got to Ore, I deployed my troops toward the western region. The bridge at Ofosu was the boundary, so I went ahead to survey the area to know the mountainous and forested areas, and I deployed my troops. So if there would be an attack on the west, they would have to cross the bridge. So I safeguarded the bridge and gave my troops instruction not to allow anybody. Let me go. Number. Let me just finish that part so that we can move back to the story. Um, After deployment of troops, I rose from my trench at about 12 midnight. It started to rain heavily, but I told the troops not to leave their trenches. So we dug in. Then when I saw the skyline of the vehicles of the Biafran soldiers coming toward us, I shouted that no one should fire except me. And the battle started minutes past midnight. But the bridge was so heavy that they could not penetrate. If they had known that we had a small number, maybe they could have made the effort to penetrate. So we confused them. The place was well secured, and we never lost any soldier. That was Leo Made, and that was how they were able to secure Ore. And the idea that people were just going to pass through it and do nothing on their way there is the only people that can believe that is clowns like the people in the comment section typing nonsense. But let's go back to what I to. So we just read Kodio Motoshaw's book. We read from his book just before dawn, where he talked about Wole Soyinka's involvement. Again, we're discussing Wole Soyinka, the Nobel Peace Prize, which I didn't want to even go deep into because it will make us start saying, oh, Ilara, because there was a lot of Ilara. Even till today, people still say we can't read this book. It's not supposed to be the Nobel Prize. People did not do it. So people did this, some people did not do it. It's still that Ilara from what Achebe wrote in 1986 when he said, winning the Nobel Prize does not make you the Ashiwaju of African literature. If am I King Paroju? I hope you can hear me if it's. No. We're going to get to that later. Maybe we'll get to that. But I know we're going to spend a lot of time on this war thing. I don't know if I even wrote it down. 1 second. Although it will tell you it did not hijack anything. But he did all of these things for people who are now saying that we never needed him. I'm audible enough. Thank you. Thank you. So we didn't stay too long on the Nobel Prize thing, but the point is anything you see on Twitter today about how Wole Soyinka is not a good writer, how he shouldn't have won anything, that thing did not start today. It started long before, and there were people even at that time who were saying that there's a particular person, not people, a particular person from a particular region who kept saying that he wasn't deserving of it, and that just because he had it does not mean that he was the Ashiwaju of African literature, right? So just know that, right? And I use that to connect with what that person said about Wole Soyinka when he was now fighting for Biafra cause. That at that point, Soyinka was like a good person because apparently he was fighting the same cause as he was. And then we went to read Kole Omotosho, who described the relationship between or the involvement of Wole Soyinka in the struggle. How Ojukwu had told Victor Banjo to go. Yes, Atona, it was Chinua Achebe. How Ojukwu had told Victor Banjo to go to the west, take over Lagos and all of that. But again, think about it. Victor Banjo was Yoruba, and in order to get in that space, it wasn't even that he didn't want to go there. Although he was conflicted, he also needed assurance from his contact within the Western region, and that contact happened to be Wole Soyinka, who was at the time was in the University of Ibadan as a lecturer, and then he was talking to him and trying to get information across to him. And this was, of course, in 1967. I was trying to get across to him, and then they had some issues with communication. And at some point, he didn't venture to Ibadan or Lagos, and then eventually everything led to the unaliving of Victor Banjo. May God rest his soul. Lagos is not necessarily west at the time. No, it was in your father's parlor. Let me go to Obasanjo in his book Command. This is what Obasanjo said about the same thing that Kole Omotosho said. So this is my command by Obasanjo. I'm going to read. Okay, let me just start. Okay. Igbo-speaking people of the Midwest and the Yorubas of the West and Lagos from himself and his sorry, let me start from here. It is not likely that the Arab-Israeli Six-Day War of June 1967, which left the Arabs defeated and demoralized in spite of the numerical superiority, gave a psychological boost to the rebels' morale and to the planning of the invasion of the Midwest in August, without taking into full consideration the differences between the two situations. On receiving the news of the events in the Midwest, sorry about the noise. I'm to Paris school. Well, Mr. Tayo, he said he did that. He did that to an extent, yes. But of course, even after Banjo, even though Banjo did not venture into the Western region, Biafran forces eventually ventured into the Western region. They just got defeated at Ore. Atuche, nobody is talking about Western region. We're talking about the fact that if you know that Lagos was not part of Western region, why did you need to go through Western region? Let me ask you a stupid question. Since you're asking one yourself. Since it was not part of Western region, why were you going through Western region? I know it's a stupid question, I know, but I think it's important to ask you that question. So let me go back to it. On receiving the news of the events in the Midwest on the morning of 9th August 1967, this is Obasanjo talking. I made efforts to strengthen the roadblocks at Ore, Ifon, Irua, Sobe, Igbataro, Irele, and Okitikupa with a view to preventing easy access to the western state by the rebels. The 11th Battalion headquarters were ordered to Akure and later to Owo. A timely visit to Ore thwarted the first determined rebel effort to break through to Ibadan and Lagos after an attempt to achieve this by overt political pressure and maneuver. Sorry, after attempts to achieve the half of Victor Banjo. So again, after he got the information from Victor Banjo, and now Obasanjo eventually went to Yakubu Gowon with the information. And of course, this eventually led to the arrest of Soyinka. But let me read what Obasanjo said about this episode. Such pressure was applied to me by someone who later turned out to be a celebrated playwright who was acting for and on behalf of Victor Banjo. On the night of the rebels' invasion of the Midwest, at about half past midnight, a normally silent telephone in my bedroom came alive for the first time since I occupied the house. I'll explain that later. On it, a reasonably confident and articulate voice told me he had a message for me and would ring back. So let me explain what happened. Should I explain? Let me finish reading it and I'll explain. On it, a reasonably confident and articulate voice told me he had a message for me and would ring back. 2 hours later, the same unidentified man rang to give me a message from Victor Banjo that I should not worry and that I should remain steadfast without indicating what really was happening. Of course, by daylight, the picture became clear when the news of the rebel invasion of the Midwest broke. Soon after, the head of state and commander-in-chief and I had useful discussions on the events of the previous night, and he gave me a serious warning in respect of certain personalities in the West and their covert support for the rebels. Later that afternoon, the same caller of the night rang me in the office. By this time, I had grown impatient and inquisitive about my unidentified regular caller. I then asked for a meeting, choosing as a rendezvous the petrol station at the junction of Ibadan Polytechnic Road and Oyo Road, and a time of 8 o'clock at night. The man, who is also a renowned social critic, turned out promptly at the appointed place and time. I invited him to my car, and for almost 2 hours, we drove round Ibadan and discussed Banjo's request for me to grant him unhindered access to Ibadan and Lagos at any price. Both the request and the price were turned down. I found out later that the man and his friend who brought him the rendezvous nicknamed me "My duty must be due" for turning down the request. Surprisingly, I also realized that unknown to one another, we both made plans to be shadowed by friends. Frederick Forsyth, in his book Biafra Story, asserted that Banjo passed the message to Chief Awolowo. probably through the same emissary, for a grand design that would eliminate Ojukwu and depose Gowon, leaving the leadership of Nigeria for the picking. Again, that's Freddie Fawcett, and you know who he writes for. During my visit on 10th August 1967 to all the West, Midwest border areas where troops were stationed, under Lieutenant Iluyomade, who I read his interview earlier, were not holding their defensive position at Ofusu, which is at the boundary town, which is at the boundary between the West and the Midwest, but at out the quarry camp, a distance of 15 miles of where they were supposed to be. Anyway, that I make sure I mention the Iluyomade pass so that you see the connections. So, picking area. Let me finish reading it since you want to hear it. If it connects to this conversation, please tell me, because you are smarter than you think you are. So let me read it for you, just for you. They were immediately ordered to move to Ofusu, in addition to the limited experience and training of soldiers being deployed along the border. How does that affect what I'm saying? Let me go back to talk to sensible people. The point is that what Kole Omotosho said about Soyinka's involvement, Obasanjo also repeated it. Why is this important? Because after Wole Soyinka got the information from Victor Banjo through his phone in UI, he somehow got the phone in Obasanjo's room to ring. In other words, he got the number or put the phone there somehow. As a matter of fact, some people will say he actually put the phone there. Some people will say he somehow got the number. But then he called the line, and then Obasanjo said for the first time since he got to Ibadan, that phone rang, and then he picked it. But then, of course, Soyinka did not say anything, but just said, you should relax, you should be brave, and things like that. Then he called again, and then the third time they decided to meet at the rendezvous somewhere in around Polytechnic Ibadan or your road. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this. Obasanjo met Soyinka. Soyinka conveyed the message or relayed the message from Victor Banjo to Obasanjo, telling him that, you know what, Victor Banjo wants to get access to Ibadan and Lagos. Why Ibadan? Because Ibadan is very strategic. Because Ibadan had a battalion as well. So this thing about, we're just going to Lagos, it makes no sense, because even Banjo says he wanted to go through that, and that's one of the things that Wole Soyinka said to Obasanjo. Of course, Obasanjo eventually now put that across to Gowon, who, of course, eventually was able to tell him that, they eventually picked, what's his name, Wole Soyinka, and arrested him. So we've seen the same account from Kole Motosho and from Obasanjo in his book. I want to read another thing that could also help the argument. This one is by Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, right? And he was writing something about Chino Achebe. And this is what he said. This is what she said. Okigbo had also captured the somber mood of the time. The arrows of God tremble at the gates of light. The drums of curfew pander to a dance of death. J.P. Clark suggests in a poem that Soyinka, in an effort to avert war, shuttled off to the southeast to meet with Okigbo and tell him that the Yorubas of the western region would support a Biafran invasion because they were also unhappy with the domination of the north and were eagerly waiting to join the rebellion. The civil war broke out on May 30, 1967, when the Igbos when the Igbos in the southeast, under Colonel Emeka Odumegwu, declared Biafra an independent state, with Enugu chosen as its capital. Biafra also had its own national currency. The Igbos had made the secessionist move with the promise of Chief Obafemi Awolowo in the southwest of the Yoruba would follow suit. The plan was, if the southeast and southwest broke away from Nigeria Federal Union, the federal government would not be able to fight on two war fronts. Awolowo, however, failed. Again, this particular thing, you only hear it from a particular group. Awolowo don't suffer from people. By the way, we're going to have a session on Awolowo. I'll let you know when, but it's a very long session. We're going to be debunking all these claims, but today we're just going to focus on Soyinka and his involvement in this event. So they said Awolowo failed to honor his pledge, and the secession proved a nightmare for the Igbos. Awolowo, in fact, became the Minister of Finance of the federal government during the Civil War. The Igbos interpreted this as a sign of bad faith on the part of Yoruba leader, and trust was further eroded between the two ethnic groups. The Yorubas, using superior federal military power in alliance with the North and other Nigerian groups, and supported by the British forces, forced the Igbos back into the Federal Union after a period of 3 years. It's actually quite interesting that when I saw this book, when I saw this particular page of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I was I was gobsmacked. I was gobsmacked because apparently she also she drank the Kool-Aid. And again, one of the beautiful things I will tell you this about the Biafran side during the war is how much they perfected the art of propaganda. They perfected it. Thanks to people like Kojuku, thanks to people like Chino Achebe, they perfected it. And the good thing about that is that they were able to sell a story to their people, and those people believed it. The bad thing is that 54 years after the war, those people still believe those things. Have you ever seen this movie Inception? Have you seen the movie Inception? Has anybody here seen the movie Inception? Let me just see in the comment section if you've seen the movie Inception featuring Leonardo DiCaprio. When you put, yeah, thank you, Byron. When you put something in the mind of a person, it's difficult to get that idea out, because that idea, every time I think about the Civil War and what all this propaganda that people share today, I just think of Inception. It's like a dream within a dream within a dream, and it's so deeply entrenched that it's so difficult for you to get people to be turned away, even when they have degrees, masters or PhD. You cannot tear people away from that particular mindset because it's deeply entrenched. They put it deep in there. And even when you want to have conversations, you have people like the one who was writing earlier, just to put things to make it seem as though the things that happened did not happen, just so that anybody you are supposed to be grateful for, you are not grateful to them. That concept goes both ways. No, there's no both ways. There's only one way. It's not the person that is putting it in you that's even the problem. He can decide to stop putting it at any time. The problem is that if they put it inside you, and you never questioned it, you constantly think like that. The thing for me, for instance, is that I can read both sides and I can tell, you can see the things that are said and the things that are unsaid. I didn't mute anybody. Is Atuche still here? Tiwa, please check, and if he's still here, please unmute him, and please don't mute him again. To be fair, he wasn't insulting. And it's okay if we don't agree on these things. It's okay. It's okay if we don't agree. However, when you start becoming unnecessarily cantankerous, people are going to mute you. That's the truth. But if he's still here, please unmute him. So back to what we're saying. You can look at what people from this side say, and you can understand why they will say it. Like I said earlier when I started, when I read There Was a Country by Chinua Achebe, I understood why he would write it that way. Number one, it was literally the means of communication for Biafra. It was the chief of propaganda, so to speak. And I understood why he would think that way. But that's just for me to be able to, empathize with him, not to believe him. I empathize with you. I read what you have said. Then, okay, where are the O's? The O's I saw, I noted them. The things that were right, I picked them. And then I can do the same thing for Ademulegun. I keep mentioning Ademulegun. Ademoyega. I can do the same thing for Frederick Forsyth. I can even do the same thing for the Marxillian book that some people talk about. I can do the same thing for every account, for Alabi Sama's account. And then you put all of that together and then you make up your mind. But then the thing about propaganda is that you don't think of anything else but what you've been told, even when you have degree in any other course, whether you study whatever course you studied. Somehow people are still thinking the exact same way, regardless of whether they have anything to support their claim. And when we get to our, which we are going to do, we're going to bring out those documents, the minutes of the meeting, the things that were said and the things that were not said. You are going to see it. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on Wole Soyinka. And I stopped to say all of that because I think it's important that, thank you very much for the gift. I think it's important that, again, not from a place of hate, not from a place of denigrate. You're not trying to denigrate another group or pull them down, but you have to stand tall and come out of this domination of lies and propaganda and gaslighting that keeps going on, that makes young people call themselves Yoruba bot. I am Yoruba bot. Do you not understand what they are saying? You don't even understand what they are saying. You don't even get what they are saying. They are using what they are saying. Hopefully we have a movie. No, we don't need a movie made, because the movie that is being made, it depends on who is making the movies. And I've seen the ones I've seen. The only one that made sense is 1976. And even that one, it had nothing to do with the war itself. That's a movie by Rita Dominic. That's the only one that I know that it's about the war and can make sense. The movie is about the war. And again, if you want to write about that thing, or study it, you've got to read everybody's account. Listen, when I read Chinua Achebe, this guy did not talk because for the first time, he noticed that Chinua Achebe was supporting Wole Soyinka. But when I started speaking about Iluyomade, you got angry. Why? Because it was a Yoruba author. That's not how to read. Why am I quoting Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, even if I don't agree with her on this particular matter? Because just because I don't agree with her on this particular matter does not mean she doesn't have something to add to the conversation. But once you say things like, oh, is Ngozi, Igbo name, oh, I know she's going to Kimiko, then you don't even consider it at all. So the way to have this conversation, if you really want to be serious and not just go around crying as the victim, is to study what happened in different instances. And you know one of the things that you discover, especially if you speak to people from the South, you know what you're going to take away? There is no perpetual victim in that war. As a matter of fact, some people who claim to be victims were also the aggressors in certain other spaces, especially the South. But again, that's not the conversation for today. But I'm just saying that the reason we are talking is about Wole Soyinka. But if you now come around and start telling us that they were doing it for themselves, then we'll probably find a way to go deeper into it. And we've not gone deep into it, but if need be, we will do that. So that was Okonjo-Iweala saying what she said about Wole Soyinka and saying that affirming that Soyinka was traveling from the western region to the eastern region to try to ensure that they solve the issue. But then somebody on TikTok in 2024 is telling us that Soyinka did nothing for the Igbos and that and that Soyinka was just doing whatever he did for himself. Tell me about how to be an ingrate. You ask this guy, he should be able to teach you if you want to learn from him. But there's something else I want to read before I let someone else speak. So during his birthday, okay, no, it's not his birthday. There's a book I mentioned earlier. So I've talked about. Let me just go through the books in case you want to check them out. I've read from Arcade the Childhood Years, talking about how he grew up. We've talked about how he grew up, his mother, the fact that he was in Ibadan, GCI, and that eventually he went to Leeds University. After a while, he got an award and a grant, returned to Nigeria, did theater, dramas, eventually went to lecture in Ife. Of course, we also mentioned the confraternity issue, that when people, especially from a particular place in Nigeria, say the only thing he has added to Nigeria is called groups, and you see Yoruba people say, oh, that's true, you know that both the people that are saying it, or you know what, maybe the people that are saying it actually know better, but the Yoruba people telling them that, oh, it must be true, they are very ignorant. It was not a cult. Confraternity was a social club, and you still see confraternities all across North America, right? You see the fraternities for the brothers, and you see the sororities for the sisters. And by the way, fraternity just means brotherhood. Sorority means sisterhood, and you find several clubs like that. Most was when they started in 1952. It was not created as a cult group. They were not trying to hurt anybody, and they didn't hurt anybody. As a matter of fact, right now they're also registered in Nigeria as the National Association of Sea Dogs. I was never a part of it, but I hate people, and I use the word hate, knowing fully well that hate is a very strong word. I hate when people are ignorantly or intentionally misleading the populace about specific people groups just because they hate them. That's what I hate. I don't even hate those people. I just hate that act, right? So it was not a cult group. It was a social club. And they did a lot of good things. By the way, some of them eventually went on to become, in fact, all the first 7 members went on to become really, really great people. And one of them, like we mentioned, Imokwede is the father of the present, should I call him the chairman of Access Bank, Ike Imokwede. I also read there was a country by Chinua Achebe. It's a book about the war, and it's his own recollection of the war, but it's a very, 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 very very, very subjective publication, but it is what it is. And then we start talking about what Soyinka did during the Biafra War. Oh yes, the Baron is biased. What he did during the Biafran War, and we read from Just Before Dawn by Kole Motoshaw. We read My Command by Obasanjo, and that was Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala that I read earlier. I'm going to read something else that had to do with what he said in a book that he wrote. The book is called The Open Sore of a Continent. The Open Sore of a Continent. I'm just going to read some things in there, and then we'll find a way to tie all that together. I'll allow other people to speak, and then I'll come back to other things. I still want to talk about the Abacha days. I want to talk about his work with Nadeko and Pronako, and things like that. So let me just read this, and then I'll allow you guys on stage to speak. If you want to join the platform, please come up. If you want to join the conversation, please come up and on the platform. We'd love to hear you. Just make sure that you don't come here to gaslight people. And it would be a lot better if you at least have something to refer to. So this is the open soul of a continent. I'm going to read a particular section called the reversible Ikemba. In fact, you know what? Let me go back to read something. And I will tell you the reason I want to read this. In fact, you will know why I'm reading this paragraph. Welcome, Olabola. It says, researchers in mass communication are guaranteed, I promise, one of the most fascinating fields of research in the plethora of mainstream underground, fake underground, pseudo mainstream, and so forth publications that stretch public credulity to limits during this political phase. Sorry, let me just read that again. Researchers in mass communication are guaranteed, I promised, one of the most fascinating fields of research in the plethora of mainstream, underground, fake underground, pseudo mainstream, and so forth publications that stretched public credulity to the limits during the political phase of the Nigerian crisis. Then it says this. Since I must, however, acknowledge my own share of the responsibility for goading the Nigerian media into the Samsdat tradition in public lectures, media workshops, and private discussions as a logical response to arbitrary closures of media houses, I can only shake my head in chagrin at the many faces worn by Eshu. Unquestionably, in this context, the muse of poetic justice. Let me even say something, having read that. You know, yesterday we were talking about Eshu, and people were telling us that it's a positive bit, it's not negative. Let me read what he said again about Eshu. And if you don't know anything about those deities, best don't talk about them. I don't care if you are worshiping or venerating them Monday to Friday. You don't know who you are worshiping. Let me read something to you from here. It says, I can only shake my head in chagrin at the many faces worn by Eshu. Unquestionably, in this context, the muse of poetic justice was basically looking at himself in that particular context as Eshu, playing the two-faced or multi-faced character in that particular episode. But let's continue. Such were the last desperate days of Babangida in office, and such was the cause that at least a sprinkling of intellectuals. And by the way, this is the Wole Soyinka 20 years after the war, who now understood life better, who sees life differently than it did in the 60s, where it was, as young people, let me say this before I continue. As young people, it's easy to be very idealistic, right? Everybody knows nothing. You know everything. And, the elders are stupid. The elders have no sense. Let's insult all of them. Insult Wole Soyinka, insult Adeboye, insult Kumuyi, insult anybody. Once the name sounds Yoruba or Idepo, anybody Yoruba, insult them, because when you do that, your friends say you are one Nigeria. You are being used, and you are stupid for being used, and it's not their fault, it's your fault. Wole Soyinka was used very well. And in 2024, there are people that will come, even in this comment section, to tell us that he did nothing for them and he just did it for himself. That may be your end if you continue in that path. But more importantly, is that years later, having gone through life, he's now writing this book, Open Soul of a Continent. And please listen to his own opinion at this point in history. Such were the last desperate days of Babangida in office, and such was the cause that at least a sprinkling of intellectuals, a predictable section of the political class, mildly called me comrade call me comrade radicals of the mold of Uche Chukwumerije and rehabilitated secessionists somehow found congenial to their individual ambitions. Since Biafra is a well-known subject in these parts, and the name, pace, and beard of Odumegwu Ojukwu and the leader of that breakaway enclave did attain iconic dimensions in universal imagination, at par with the images of swollen kwashiorkor bellies of Biafran children, this recent history will be incomplete without tribute being paid to him for his role in these various machinations. I have already referred to the necessity of admitting into our nation calculus all significant elements of self-interest, then seeking a way to accommodate them in a practical way, abandoning all further pretense of idealism and patriotic fervor. Please, I like that line. Abandoning all further pretense of idealism and patriotic fervor. All that thing on Twitter, where people tell you what should be done. Other videos on TikTok, people tell you that it's not supposed to do that. The president is wrong. All that pretense of idealism. And you don't look, because you've not really sat down to think things through. You're just being used because it serves, and then it makes you feel good because the vast majority of your friends think that these particular people are the problem. And because you want to be in the good books of those friends, you keep saying, I am Yoruba, but I agree with you. You are stupid. Because what you are doing is not different from what the elders did, but you've not even studied enough to see their mistakes so you can learn from them. And that's why today, when you notice that they are not doing what you think they should be doing, you insult them, not knowing that they've gone through what you are going through at the moment. And by the way, I'm talking to young people who are very fond of doing that Yoruba bot nonsense. So he said here, and this is Wole Soyinka, he said, abandoning all further pretense of idealism and patriotic fervor. All the idealism they talk about in the Southwest, let people practice that idealism in their region. Let us see the effect of that thing where they're coming from. And then we can learn from them. Don't use Southwest as a place to practice idealism and patriotic fervor. Try it where you're coming from, and then we can learn from that as well. The title of the book is The Open Soul of a Continent. I've read others. The other things are by Kule Motosho and Olusegun Obasanjo. But let's continue. And thank you all for joining. Let's keep tapping and sharing as well. Thank you so much. Abandoning all further pretense of idealism and patriotic fervor, Odumegwu Ojukwu, former head of state of the short-lived Biafra nation, is one unassailable instance of this hard-headed view of the patriotic instinct. The Biafran and Ojukwu's grip on the world's historical memory is so deep that even today, and indeed during any post-Biafran crisis, I find I am often asked this question. By the way, what has become of that Biafran man you know, the one with the very heavy beard and heavier Oxford accent? The answer is relevant as ever, and in his own words, the title of the slim, near barren exposition of such assiduously sought relevance is biography. Because I am involved. Because I'm involved in his biography, that's Ojukwu's biography. The nature of Ojukwu's involvement has taken many bizarre turns since his triumphal return to Nigeria in 1982. Enticed thither by desperate Shehu Shagari, who was bent on wooing the Igbo ex-Biafrans into the folds of his party for his re-election campaign. To all Nigerians, and this includes a majority of his own Igbo people, Ojukwu has demonstrated a remarkable involvement with the project of browsing where the pasture appears greenest. Since first shocking the nation, except it must be conceded, a handful of die-hard followers by pitching his camp with a party, several of whose leading figures were certainly culpable for the massacres perpetrated against his own people in 1966, a genocidal event that provided Ojukwu a moral platform for a secessionist gamble. Ojukwu's political career has been marked by a series of surprises. He holds, by the way, a chieftaincy title, the Ikemba of Nnewi, but many Nigerians find it more appropriate these days to refer to him as the reversible Ikemba. So it was not really acting out of character when the Ikemba began a series of courtesy visits to Babangida to express solidarity with him and to salute his courage in cancelling the 1993 elections. Did you guys know this? Maybe we'll get deep into that, but I think we have started already. that when Babangida cancelled the 1993 elections, one of the first set of people that went to visit Babangida was actually Ojukwu. Again, I'm reading The Opus of a Continent. It was written by Wole Soyinka. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because nobody should, if you want to support people, listen, support Hausa, support Igbo, support Ibibio, support Kanuri, support them for who they are. Never support anybody because you're being blackmailed into supporting them, because certain people play the victim. So support everybody, hate no one, hate nobody, but don't be blackmailed because of your lack of information that certain people are the victim of a certain thing, and that is why you cannot support people because you're being gaslighted. The day you discover that it was all lies, you're going to hate them more. And that's why I say hate no one, support anyone you want to support, but don't do it on the basis of blackmail. I'm going to continue. Upholding the results of the elections, he declared would have plunged, this was Ojukwu talking. Upholding the results of the elections, he declared, would have plunged the country into chaos, for it would have signaled a return to ethnic politics. Have you noticed people throw this? It's the same game plan. It's the same playbook. You hear tribalist, bigot, bigot, you got. Everybody says the same thing. Ojukwu said exactly the same thing. Ethnic politics. Zeke said the same thing. Let me even humor you guys. Again, when we're discussing how we'll go deep into this. You know, one day, Zeke wrote in his work, in his paper, West African Pilot, calling, Awo and the rest of Yoruba people tribalists or ethnic jingoists because they started Egbe Omodudua. Forgetting, or I don't even think he forgot, I just think he decided not to remember. Forgetting that the Igbo World Congress actually existed long before Egbe Omodudua even came to be. Interestingly, Ibibio actually had their own ethnic nationality, ethnic group, right? Before Igbo copied them and they did their own. Then much later, Yoruba did their own, then it became a problem of tribalism. We're going to talk about Igbo Oduduwa another time. But the point is that the playbook is the same. They call you a tribalist. They call you a bigot. I like the bigot, bigot, you got. I like the rhyme. I like poetry. They call you all of that because what they're really after, and I'm talking generally speaking, people who do that, regardless of who they are, I don't care where they're from. People who do that are not really concerned about the matter at hand. They're trying to get you to do what they want you to do, regardless of whether that thing will favor you or not. It is selfish. Upholding the result of the elections, Ojukwu declared would have plunged the country into chaos, for it would have signaled a return to ethnic politics. No, Siri, guys, I'm going to hold on. I'm going to pause for it. I know you guys say I should not read the comment section, but sometimes it's important. No, Siri, the last time anybody voted anybody from the north in Enugu was in 1956. It was before independence. I can tell you that in this fourth republic, many people from your region have been voted into office in the southwest. You cannot be using 1956 to counter such narratives. It's stupid. And that's the problem. People are afraid to be called haters. I don't hate you. I don't even have any. Number one, what's the benefit for hating? What do I gain from hating you? My point is just that stop. We know what happened. We know the game. We know the game. And if I refuse to be blackmailed, it's not because I hate you, it's because I love myself. And loving myself, if loving myself means I hate you, then it's a you problem, it's not a me problem. Right? And this thing of we voted and a Fulani in 1956, that was a party issue, was NCNC, and we can go deep into it, but not today. And the last time it happened was for crying out loud, 4 years before independence. You are using that as a comeback in 2024. Grow up. Upholding the results of the elections, Ojukwu declared would have plunged the country into chaos, for it would have signaled a return to ethnic politics. The Kemba's voice was also to be heard on BBC, hysterically expounding the same thesis, backed by a species of logical. I'm going to take that again. The Kemba's voice was also to be heard on the BBC, hysterically expounding the same thesis, backed by a species of logical proceeding that was anchored, it would appear, on the fact that Moshood Abiola's own people, the Yoruba, voted en masse for him. Never a mention, never a mention by the Ikemba that Abiola also defeated his opponents in his own home base, or that he scored handsomely among Ojuku's own Igbo people. But does any of this matter? Basharun MKO Abiola was won unambiguously according to every rule prescribed by the National Electoral Commission. That's the neck. No, I don't even dislike anybody. That's the thing. That's the truth. I really don't dislike anybody. I think it's a waste of energy. If there's anything you have that you should guard with your life, it's your energy. Forget money. Money is important, to be fair, but energy is very, very important. Like, I have to be able to harness my energy for things that matter. But one of those things that helped me is to love myself. And if loving myself means that I hate you, then you need a mirror. I don't need to check myself. But thank you for that, Fitz. Just that I don't dislike people. Where was I? Perhaps Ojuku's recovered patriotism is best understood by the fact that in the midst of the post-annulment crisis, Ibrahim Babangida actually found time to perform a magnanimous act of redress for wrongs long committed against our ethnic champion. One of the very last acts of the outgoing dictator was to sign a decree, virtually on the eve of his departure from Aso Rock, restoring to Ojukwu the landed properties that he had somehow forfeited or had been acquired by the Lagos state after the Civil War. I don't know why people don't see the person to blame is very close to them. They're always looking out for somebody outside. It's ridiculous. In fairness, to our worthy successor to the now forgotten Moise Shombe of Katanga in the policies of secession, Ojukwu has endeavored to leave down that sobriquet reversible by continuing in his new career with a remarkable consistency. Having shared Babangida's Last Supper, he ensured that he was virtually the first breakfast companion of Babangida's successor, the puppet chief Ernest Shonekon, and was shortly after espied picking his teeth after lunch with Abacha, who had unceremoniously booted out Chief Shonekon after only 4 months in office. I believe that certain legal dots and dashes had been overlooked in the certificate of reoccupancy thanks to Babangida's rushed exit from office. So what do you see here? You see a man, Wole Soyinka, who put his life on the line for the Biafran struggle. You see a man who spent 22 months in prison because of Biafra, only to now notice that the person who was in charge, who was at the top of affairs in Biafra, who escaped, however he escaped, returned at the behest of Shehu Shagari, and then began to campaign for Shehu Shagari, as if that wasn't bad enough, reinvented himself that by 1993 he was talking to IBB how it was important for the election results to be cancelled. And then just as he was done with IBB, he was also obnobbing with Ernest Shonekon, who was the one in charge of the interim government, and he did not waste time to also have a parley with Abacha, who booted out Ernest Shonekon. So what you see is this: as a person, if you were Wole Soyinka, how would you feel? This is the person, enter Antoria Gbawe, Ton Joson. This is the person that you went through all of that for, and who now does this to Abiola, and using the word ethnic politics, which of course goes beyond just the person, talking about his ethnic group. How do you view that, knowing what you have suffered for the sake of that person? When you are called traitors, what you notice is, and that's why I said that if you don't understand Nigerian politics, do not discuss it. I see all these rooms on Nigerian politics. I don't even join because there's a friend of mine who has a room. I've not been going there for a while. And I stopped going because, and if you are here, I think you know why I'm saying this, my brother. I stopped going because when people make their analysis, it gets nauseating. And they are full of idealism for a Nigeria that never existed and does not exist. And you're like, do you really want an answer to this? And that's why I don't like political conversations, because you will collect. The more you start studying the history, the more you discover that what people call you is actually a projection of their own personality and their value system. They are putting it on you so that you won't have to say it was them. And that's why they'll call you traitors. They started using that as comic routines in Nigeria, like in the 90s. People just slot it in their comedy. And everybody just, and you just laugh about it. Oh, these Yoruba people are cowards. Oh, just laugh. From what you have read, and if you ever saw in Nigerian history, who do you think actually is that coward? I don't even like to mention ethnic groups, but the point is that if a person will not call you what you are, don't call them what you are. You already are that character. They're not calling you that out of respect. Don't project that nonsense to them because you don't want them to see you in that light. We already know who is who. So I said all of that to say that even here today, in this session, you see in the comment section, someone saying that, and I'm repeating that for effect, someone saying that Soyinka did whatever he did for his own benefit, and that Victor Banjo did not help the Biafra cause at all. These are the people, again, I'm trying to make sure I don't paint an ethnic group, but it's difficult because you see them here, even now. It's difficult for you to go around just shouting one Nigeria. I believe in one Nigeria, to be fair. See, Soyinka fought for equity is a very abstract statement. It has no meaning. Soyinka fought for equity. No, it wasn't just for equity. When you use words like that, it's just abstract. Oh, he's fought for equity. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. But when you tell you Soyinka fought for Biafra, that's more like it. It was in prison for 22 months because of that. Now that gives context to it, not just equity. If it's just one abstract noun that we don't even know what it feels like, we can't touch it, we don't know what it looks like, but make it, contextualize it. He fought against injustice, yes. He fought for equity, yes. He fought for Biafra, yes. He went to prison because of Biafra, yes. And he saw the fully in what he did in his younger days when he became wiser, yes. And one of the things that made him see that fully, thank you very much for the gift. One of the reasons that made him see that fully was what transpired in not just in 82 with Shagari, but also in 93 with MK Abiola. No, not seriously, maybe we are not arguing that. Somebody else argued it earlier, maybe not you. And again, see, this is why I say don't say all the ethnic group is like that, because clearly Nosiri doesn't think what Atuche was thinking. But I know that many people think like Atuche. And I also know that just because Nosiri does not agree with him on this particular matter does not mean that he doesn't agree with him on the Abiola matter. And you can tell from what he has been typing. This is not Biafra of 1966. The point is that nothing has changed, by the way. And this is it's a good thing, but it's also a sad thing. It's good because you know that. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for the art. Nothing has changed, and why that is important is because you already know that that dog has no new tricks. The dog has Nasiri. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Nasiri. The more things change, the more they remain the same. In Nigerian politics, nothing has changed unless you don't know what you are talking about. Every word that was used against Awo was used against Nobu. Everything that was said against Wole Soyinka today was said against MKO. There's nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And that's why Nigerian political history we're going to get into it. And I'm trying to prepare our hearts using, so I'm going back and forth. I'll do ancient history. I'll do post-colonial, pre-colonial history. I'll do post-independent history, First Republic history, because that's where I'm going. But we're just going back and forth so that we get our hearts prepared. Before we get into that, and then later we'll discuss religion. But it's important that we actually understand how we got here. Not so we can blame a group, but so that you don't allow yourself to be blackmailed. I don't care whether you want to change your life or change your path in your ethnic group. That's not my concern. My concern is that whatever you do, don't tell me how I should act based on your feelings. Your feelings do not get to determine my reaction to how life works. And the more you study this, I just put myself in the shoes of Soyinka, and I feel bad. And by the way, there are some of his books I'm going to read much later. You Must Set Forth at Dawn, and The Man Died. Welcome, Dr. Oneyowa. And The Man Died. If we are going to read from those books after other people have spoken. But I'm just trying to set that context so that this idea that you can go on Twitter and type Soyinka, a 90-year-old person, insult him. you know, because he's from the same ethnic group as the president of Nigeria, insult his ethnic group, insult everybody, and then some children, the children that were not properly raised, will now say, "I am Yoruba, but I support what you are saying against Soyinka." That thing, even if the word does not, by the way, what we heard, because I'm going to put this on YouTube, it's important that we start addressing these things so that we actually know who exactly is who. Not that I hate you, but I have to learn enough about who I am so that when you come with your propaganda, I'm able to say, thank you very much, but I don't agree with you. And if you call me a bigot for that, then you are the one who has no brains. That's all. I'm going to take a break now, allow other people to speak. We're going to come back and read. So today we've read